In this video, I'm going to be talking about my life as a biracial child in Africa, Nigeria to be precise, and then also as a biracial woman migrating to Europe in her late 20s. Even this word biracial is something I can't really identify with, because as a kid growing up, I got to hear words like half-caste, mixed, mulatto, fake Igbo, unfortunate European, made in Taiwan, Oyibo pepper. And so, when you keep hearing such words as a child, you can imagine what that does to you and what you feel about yourself, because this is a label you are being given, a tag. And how do you as a child grow up with self-esteem? I don't think my parents were really aware of the impact of being biracial and the impact of such words on a child. Now, I don't want to say that the experiences I had are similar with the experiences every biracial child has. But I think somewhere along the line, a lot of biracial children had kind of similar experiences. Now, one thing I really noticed was that a lot of children and friends, they seem to have this impression that being biracial, you were kind of privileged. You didn't have this kind of issues they had. And so, even when you had friends, you know, it's a crazy thing growing up just like any other child and you don't really have such privileges, but your friends seem to think you have privileges. The first experience I made when I got to primary school was that I had this really long hair and I used to tie it in a pony at the back. And when we were running around playing, the children kept pulling on my hair and they'll just run past me, pull the hair and yank me on the floor. So I went home and asked my mom to cut my hair really short, and she was like, why would you want to cut this long hair? But I kept crying every day till she cut the hair short. And I don't even remember if I actually told her that the children were pulling me on the floor, because it was such a crazy situation. When the kids do something and you go home and tell your mom, she would come to school and, you know, march straight to the headmistress office to complain, and then the children will be even more against you. It only made the whole situation worse. And of course, those comments about my biracial identity came up even more. My mother would travel to Germany, you know, and come back with a special school bag for me. And I wouldn't want to carry this bag. I was crying my mom should buy me a metal box. She was like, why would you want to use a metal box? And I kept, you know, crying, no, I want a metal box. But instead, she bought me a box that was made out of some kind of hard carton or so. And I still cried, and I wanted to have a metal box like most of the children were carrying in those days, because I wanted to be as similar to the other children as possible. I wanted to have my hair as short as them, to carry the same box they had, just not to be different. For me, happiness at that stage was just to to be the same like any other child and not to stick out. And then too, my mother would buy things like, Pelican pens. And sometimes the children would come to me and say, give this to me, and I would say no. And they would say, okay, after school, I'm going to beat you. And when I get home, my mom would be really mad at me. You've lost your pen again. And I couldn't tell her that the pen was taken away from me, because I knew that if she comes to school and makes trouble, then I'll get into even more problem. So that was kind of how primary school was for me. It was not easy. There were quite a few of such incidents from children, and some games they would play, I couldn't play them as well. It took me a lot of time to learn, and they wouldn't give you the chance to, come into the group and play. Or I just wanted to be in the dancing group, and I couldn't dance like them, of course. And when I tried to dance, they would all laugh at me. So those kind of things, really hurt me. They made me to be more into myself and secluded. But when I got to secondary school, that's what it's called there, as you get older and you start maturing, and you now get to an age where teenagers are looking at themselves and who's beautiful and who's not, you suddenly get to realize that a lot of people actually think you're beautiful just because you have a fairer skin tone and the kind of hair you have. And you suddenly kind of realize that your looks give you a kind of advantage. But it doesn't only come with an advantage, but also a big disadvantage, because being biracial in Africa, you were exposed to a lot of attempts of sexual abuse. I don't even think it was about you looking nice or not looking nice, but often people just wanting to try something different maybe. And most biracial children are exposed to a lot of sexual abuse because at that age you are really young, the girls especially. And then at the same time you find out that often a lot of parents seem to think that you would be a bad influence on their child. They just seem to have this impression that biracial children are promiscuous, or they are spoiled, not properly brought up because they are brought up in a different manner. And it was somehow, I wouldn't say that was true, but of course it was a kind of upbringing that was different and sometimes confusing, because when you have two people with different backgrounds, each one is using their own method to kind of raise the child, and that leads to a lot of conflict. Like something your mother will allow you to do, your dad wouldn't allow it, or basic things that other children learned at home, such things weren't happening in your house. Basically, that's how it was growing up. People seem to believe you were privileged. You didn't feel privileged. You didn't even know where you belonged to. And so I would say my childhood and teenage age, it wasn't exactly happy. And I kept asking my mom, why did you marry a black man? And I kind of was angry with my parents, for getting married to each other. Why couldn't I just be black or just be white? Why couldn't I really belong somewhere? Was there anywhere in this world I could just go and just not stick out? And of course, the resentment and, from the children, and of course also the teachers sometimes, that, it kind of marks you for life. I remember once a teacher even telling me, oh, you are a bat, you don't belong anywhere. So that was like how my childhood and teenage age was. I had very few close friends. Most of the friends I had were either also biracial, or maybe they had spent a part of their life in Europe or so. So we could kind of like identify together, or rather we were like all people pushed on the same boat and we had to identify together. Because of course, as a young age, you tend to have the friends like when your parents are friends, and my mom too was keeping friends more with other white women because she didn't really fit in. So that was what it was basically like. Interestingly enough, as an adult, as about the time I got into university and as an adult, it didn't seem to play much role that I was biracial. At that time, my mom fell ill and was flown out of the country. So I would say this white part of my life was suddenly removed. And with my mother falling ill, of course, the contact to other biracial children via their parents reduced, because my mom wasn't hanging out with her friends and they wouldn't come to visit us when my mom wasn't there. So it kind of reduced that, and I moved to another town, went to university, and it didn't seem to really play a role that I was biracial. Some people thought maybe I was from somewhere in the north or whatever, but it was quite a peaceful time then as far as being biracial was concerned. But the only thing, of course, was like, maybe when you go to the market, you want to buy something, they are trying to hike up the price because they just look at you and assume by virtue of your looks or so, you should be able to afford more, or you don't know what the prices are like. So a bit of that, but being biracial wasn't really much of an issue then. Apart from, of course, that, yes, men would look at you and so, but nothing really negative or that really left a scar. So that was it. And I, at this time, had just come to the conclusion that I'm black. This issue of being biracial wasn't in the room again, so I don't want to discuss it. I was growing up in Africa. I felt every inch black. I wasn't the one that was bringing up this biracial issue. It was actually other people, until at the age of 29, when I migrated to Europe. Suddenly, it was like somebody just flipped the table around and I was suddenly black. And I came into a white society and I was being referred to as black. And you can imagine, just like, when you were in Nigeria then, people would be calling you names, you are white or so, or whatever, and suddenly you're here and people are calling you black, and now you're again faced with prejudices, racism. But I must say, the experiences I made as a child of having my color being targeted or being an issue kind of strengthened me to deal with the fact that I was now in a system that was racial. Yes, it was now racism, but I had grown up knowing what it meant for your color to be an issue and to have an impact. Unlike before, where the white part was the issue, it was now the black part that was the issue. As I said, interestingly enough, racism didn't come too much as a shock for me because I had experienced being treated differently because of your color or your looks in Africa. But also because I had already had a tinge of racism growing up as a child in Nigeria, because my mom worked for a company with Germans, and as a child, when we would go out like to visit expatriates, not white women married to Nigerian men, but expatriate families, it was kind of like, I had this feeling like my mother was kind of like embarrassed about us, or at least, more conscious about the way we are behaving, that we should behave properly. But when we were around other people, it didn't seem to bother her much, but she was almost like kind of nervous and tense that we meet up to that standard. Or when her white friends would come around, it would be like more effort in preparing for her visitors, and we had to really clean. So I already knew from my mother that, okay, she is a white woman and she seems to think that when white people come, they need a better treatment. Though I couldn't really figure it out as racism, but I had that impression. And that kind of made me a bit like rebellious as a child, because sometimes I would even go out of my way to do little things that would embarrass her. I would go to this club. They had a private club, and you would see all these German women there, and when my mom is around, they would be like really friendly to us. But when we come there without our mom, they would start coming to approach us. Oh, can't you keep quiet, or can't you do this or that, So I had an idea of what it looked like, even though I didn't really tag it as racism. So it wasn't really difficult adjusting to racism in Europe, but of course it's still hot. So now here's me in Germany, married to an African man, having an African home in a country where there's racism, there's discrimination, prejudices. And of course, like every African, what did I do? Seek contact with my fellow African brothers and sisters, try to make friends, made friends, very much integrated into the African community here. You come to realize that it doesn't even matter what you believe you are and who you know you are. That doesn't matter that much, or let me say it's not decisive. But what is important is the way other people perceive you to be and how they treat you. I wouldn't say the African community wasn't welcoming to me or that I don't feel at home in the African community, but the fact is that it's quite disheartening that a lot of people seem to think that because you are biracial, you don't have to deal with racism. You don't know how it feels like. You have it easier. You don't face the same problems. Now, this is just crazy because you are here bonding with people you feel you have a common destiny, kind of a common pain, a common enemy. And these people seem to think, no, we don't have this in common. That's just like saying, no, you are not black because you don't suffer the prejudices or the racism or the discrimination we suffer. And exactly these prejudices, racism, you suffer as a black person is what identifies and bonds you as a black person. That is what makes it so significant to say, I am a black person, because you are identified by this skin color, and not just by the skin color, but by the history of being black and the oppression of the black person. So what does it look like when you are in a racist society, you are faced with racism, discrimination, you jump to a group of people feeling we are all one, and these people every now and then send you signals like, oh no, we don't have the same problems. In fact, they try to tell you you are not black, more or less. And even when you make friends or you have friends or so, you notice that when a conflict situation comes, maybe in a group or in a community or so, when the cards are all on the table, they will let you know that truly you don't belong there. They make more of an issue about that white factor in you than you do. So I made a few of these experiences, and that wasn't very encouraging. Of course, it didn't stop me knowing who I am and, being a proud black Igbo woman. But it does hurt sometimes to see people trying to discredit you of your identity. When you see people trying to push you out of where you belong. And at this time, when I had one of these encounters, I kind of had this impression like, oh, but maybe it's the Africans I'm meeting here. In Africa, Nigeria, my older life, and as an adult, my biracial factor wasn't even an issue any longer. And then one day I came upon this video, and I just have to play an extract of this video for you to see.
Content that the freeze. Did I hear him talk about Yoruba again? If I don't finish him. Insulting me, I won't, but insult Yoruba. That bastard. Tell any day I hear him talk about Yoruba. That, who, do they know his father? That the freeze has the father. Who is his father? That half-caste who is born by Somalia. Did I hear him insult Yoruba again? I'll deal with him. Yoruba may not talk, but I can't be alive to insult my father. If that, who gave back to him? If he has a father, let him show us the father's picture. Somebody they gave back to the sheep. Does he look like a Nigerian? That's a Somalian. He's a bastard. He's a bastard. Does he have a father? Who is his father? Let him show his father's picture. If he has a father. Man who cannot marry. Yeah.
So here is a pastor who has a very large congregation making a hate speech against a biracial pastor, a pastor whose father is Nigerian and has a white mother. And look at how the audience is cheering him on. This is a hate speech. It's not only a hate speech, it's inciting people against biracial people. Look at the kind of man saying this, his status, how widespread his message is going, the way people believe in him. How could this pastor, because of a dispute among pastors, go on to say such a thing filled with so much hatred against this man's racial identity? Did he realize what he did to all biracial people? Can he even fathom what goes through people when they see something like this? I played this video several times. I was hurt and I was shocked. Even though I sit here in Germany, it just like went through my head. God, where is peace? Where can you just be with people who allow you to identify with them? Here you're white, there you are black, here you are fake white, here you are fake black. White people have their white communities, black people have their black communities. If you're white, you can go to a country and be a majority or a minority. If you're black, you can go to a place, be a majority or a minority. But what about biracial people? We are quasi paying the price for a union between a black person and a white person. A black person and a white person brought this about, and we are paying for it. And I think this is the question a lot of biracial people have had to ask themselves. where and when can I just be in a place where my color won't be an issue, or where I can be just totally blended? Because I came to realize it's not only important what you feel you are, but how other people take you to be. I would say for myself that I'm a very proud Black woman. I'm very actively engaged trying to point out racism. I would even say that I have more pride in my Blackness, despite the white factor in me. I'm more proud of my Blackness than a lot of other people. I didn't ever one day wish to be a little bit lighter or put on makeup to look whiter or do anything to distort myself. I never felt darker was less attractive, or so it's like kind of crazy. Some of these people that feel, oh, you're not really a part of us, are striving all they can to identify as much as possible or to change themselves as much as possible to look like a white person. And yet, casting off other people that are Black because you feel they are not Black enough. And that's not okay. My advice to all biracial people, especially the younger ones, be proud of who you are. Be proud of your color. Be proud of being biracial. For a long time, I tried to shut it out. Identify myself as fully Black. I didn't want to talk about the white part of me because I thought it would make things easier. But that doesn't help when the others don't really accept you. So now I've come to terms with it. Yes, I'm biracial, but yes, I'm African and Black, but I'm also biracial. So I have the cream on top of the cake. That's the way I see it. Yes, I'm Black, but I'm also biracial. So be proud of who you are. You're still a Black person. You're awesome. There are others like you too. We've gone through this. Some of us even more. It's so strange. Anytime I walk around and I see a biracial child, sometimes these children, they can't even talk yet. They're sitting in their buggies, prams. You walk past as a biracial adult and you see this child really looking at you, trying to catch eye contact. There's something about biracial people. Even when we don't speak to each other, we speak with our eyes to each other. We identify with each other. So be proud of who you are. Don't ever let anybody tell you you are something less or deny you your identity. Not a Black person and not a white person. I wish I could give you some other advice, but actually, it's not about telling you to be proud or to be strong. It's not you who has to change, but the world that has to change. Racism has to stop. And black people have to stop this colorism, grading people according to colors, lighter, darker shade. I used to feel angry about that before, but I've come to understand that because of the evil that has been done to black people by white people, and because a lot of black people associate white with negative, and some of course have this inferiority complex towards white, it's only normal that if you carry this whiteness in you, that these feelings towards the white race might also get projected on you. So they're not doing it because they hate you or dislike you, but because the black man, woman has been a victim of racism for too long. And I believe strongly that the day we find a solution to racism, we'll also find a solution for biracial people. We'll be able to, enjoy the positive aspects of being biracial, and of course being the product of hopefully a lot of love between black and white, and yeah, only an end to hate can bring about love.